As we trudge through the week to reach the deadline, the Flames are at it with their usual antics.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, joined by my partner in crime, Nick Zeraris. Nick, how are you doing today?
This is one of the more exciting times of the season, so a lot of fun, actually.
Yes, and today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. The deadline is almost here. We're starting to see people actually start kicking their tires, and we're going to talk about that today and how the Flames kind of set the market. But of course, we have to talk about all of Martin Pospisil's antics last night against the Seattle Kraken. So, make sure you stick around for that. You can follow Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. You would think that a player that has as serious as a concussion history as Martin Pospisil, he would maybe play with a little more carefulness.
It's fascinating when you put it like that, because you think about it in terms of a lot of these guys just don't think it'll happen to them. You know, this is somebody who's had it happen multiple times, dealt with it at very serious levels. Mm-hmm. But based on the way he plays and the way he has played, he's going to operate under the assumption it won't happen to him again. And I know there are a lot of guys in hockey and in football and any of these dangerous sports, same thing you say about motorsports as well, that think just because it happened to someone else, it won't happen to me. And a lot of them have an underlying feeling that if they allow themselves to have that thought creep into their mind, they're going to lose their edge and not be able to be as competitive, because they're going to argue, if I'm playing with fear, I'm not going to be able to do my job as well. So there are a lot of these guys who play on that line, walk that line. I know that's something that Huska's talked about in regards to Pospisil's game, that he has to play on that edge to be effective because that's part of his game. And it's an important component within hockey as we currently understand it at the moment. But a lot of these guys don't think it'll happen to them, even if it's already happened before. They do not allow themselves to have that thought because they feel like it'll make them less competitive.
Definitely. And I think what is so, it feels so obvious to not cross that line. You can still make a good hit, but you don't need to fold a guy like an accordion to make it effective or to send a message. It's just, I just think about the interview that Pospisil did, I believe it was late last season, where he talked about how hard it was being alone in Canada with no friends, no family. He couldn't really be around the team because of how severe his concussion was. Would that not make you think twice before doing something?
I am eternally fascinated by these types of guys who toe this line and live on this line. Pospisil's not the only one. There are plenty of guys around the league who consistently operate in that gray area based on, the very simple principle. Everybody who was in elementary school who punched one of their friends and didn't get caught, they'll do it again. And because the way the Department of Player Safety operates, where players get paid when they're hurt, but not when they're suspended, where the owners and the stakeholders feel that they need this violence within the game for whatever reason, they feel that it's important that there is this violence, this danger, that it gives the game more stakes and it makes people more engaged with it and feel more intense emotions during it. I understand all of that, and that's baked into the game. That's why hockey is the way it is, especially at the NHL level, where you have teams that employ guys who can't do anything other than this kind of stuff. And that's not to say Pospisil is not a useful player, because he is. He's a decent hockey player. He's inexpensive. He's the type of guy you want on a team during a transitionary period, because he's not going to go out there and shortchange you. You know what you're going to get from him on most nights. It's just the thing that's always befuddled me is this is going to have a blowback. You know, you saw it in the game last night where Coleman threw that hit and then he got into a fight with Tanev because of the hit. Just because 2 different times during the game, Pospisil, threw questionable hits. The first one, a little less bad. The second one's inexcusable. The one he got thrown out of the game for, you can't do that. The first one is bad, but the second one you can't do. The second one you have to know better and you can't do.
Yeah, and I feel like we've talked about it before too. It's a domino effect, and it's not just your well-being as well as the person you crunched, but the fights with your teammates and another player on the opponent. Like, it's going to have a trickle-down effect, whether that be something as serious as say Blake Coleman got seriously hurt, or allowing a power play goal. Like, there's not many reasons to continue to play like that.
And at the point in the game, the Flames are down goals at that point, and they need their good players on the ice. Like, I understand that Coleman got, I don't want to say goaded into the fight, but he threw the initial hit. Tanev cross-checked him, and he more or less, okay, that's not going to fly. But Blake Coleman is one of the guys you want on the ice at the end of the game when you're trying to chase a goal. That's what's always frustrated me with this type of stuff. And I know there are people who will say, well, you don't value fighting, you don't value physical play. They have a place within the game, but we're trying to win the game here. We're down 2 goals, and one of our best players is getting into a fight because the tension within the game has gotten a little higher because of a wholly unnecessary hit. I have no issue with fighting as a concept within hockey. Sure, it's dumb and short-term rewarding. It's great for that 2 minutes, but as you're sitting in the penalty box icing your hand or your face, you probably have, that moment of clarity of like, wow, that was kind of a stupid decision, especially when you're a player who's good, like Blake Coleman, who should be on the ice and not fighting.
Yeah, it's a post-fight clarity, I'm sure. And, I'm sure when like you said, when you're icing your hand, when you're getting wrapped up, when you're getting stitched up, like, there has to be something on top of like the adrenaline that's like, okay, that was dumb. Because there are players that go out there and act a fool, go to the penalty box, and you don't see, like, it's not a recurring issue, or I shouldn't say issue, but it's not a recurring behavior.
It's really, as long as the Department of Player Safety is inconsistent as it is, and he's going to have a hearing. I didn't see it was in person, so it's probably less than 5 games, but as long as the Department of Player Safety is inconsistent as it is, we will continue to operate in this gray area where guys will take things into their own hands, where they're going to say, I was trying to get the team going, I wanted to throw a big hit, and they'll get the plausible deniability of, I wasn't trying to hurt the guy, I was just trying to make an impact in the game, and we'll continue this song and dance indefinitely, because as long as the owners are okay with this, it won't change. It's that simple. If the owners had a problem with guys getting hurt by this type of stuff, it would be out of the game within a week. It's really easy to legislate certain things out of the game if you really want to, but there's no appetite for that. So we exist in this gray area.
I would love to see like an anonymous poll like that we get from The Athletic a lot, from general managers. Like, what is your stance on this? Like, no, your name's not attached to this.
You don't want their opinions. Those guys think hockey's soft now. You hear John Tortorella refer to the guys who play the game now as dumb, that they don't know what they're doing. There is a real appetite amongst the people within hockey. I mean, I think about how Reeves got into that fight against the Coyotes. What was that, Friday or Thursday of last week? And the first clip I saw on Twitter was Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner sitting there clapping like seals at the zoo on the bench, amused, like, ooh, fight. that's not to discredit who they are as hockey players, but their opinions about safety, their opinions about the quality of the game, that doesn't matter to me as much. I would rather a scientist who's an expert in brain damage give their opinions on these things, as opposed to guys who think hockey ought to be played a certain way because it was played like that 100 years ago.
Yes, and this is your friendly reminder to go read Boy on Ice, and I expect a book report, because you're going to view this a lot differently. But coming up next, we are going to continue the talk of the trade deadline, as we are just days away. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break and talk to you about Sleeper. We are past the halfway point in the season, Flames fans, and we all know where we are. Regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind you that you can win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like McDavid or McKinnon will record more or less than their Sleeper projections on things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Flames fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're getting your podcasts and on YouTube as well. Elias Lindholm to the Bruins?
It's fascinating, man. The way you think about this stuff, I generally, at least, I shouldn't say everybody, but I generally dig these guys for being uncreative, unimaginative, for refusing to admit they made mistakes, for believing in the sunk cost fallacy. But it would be very baller for the Canucks to have 3 weeks of Elias Lindholm and be like, Jake Gensel's better. We should try and get Jake Gensel. Like, just frankly speaking, not enough GMs are brave enough to do stuff like that. It takes real conviction to say, I was wrong. I'm going to do better. Because a lot of these guys don't care. A lot of these guys would rather be right and hurt the team than be wrong and admit they were wrong. Because these are people with massive egos who think their ego is why they are where they are. We talked a lot about this a lot last summer and trying to pick a GM, pick a coach. It is hard for these guys who have gotten everywhere in their lives. They think off of their intelligence and their character to deviate from their intelligence and their character. They think they know everything, and that's, they think that's a good thing, that they think they know everything. So to admit you were even moderately wrong, and 20 games doesn't make a player. I think Lindholm will ultimately end up being fine.
Yeah.
But it at least shows some creativity.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate any sort of, I guess a quick flip. Like I think a lot of it, he was worried about just being a rental. And, well, now you're going to have 3 teams and potentially 3 teams in 2 months. And that's incredible. Like, you turn down stability and money. Thank you for doing that. But, I mean, good on the Canucks. Thank you for everything you gave us. But, like, this is even better.
It's interesting. It is very, very interesting. With the game of musical chairs that's going on right now, there are 2 slam dunk blue chip players available at this deadline in Buchnevich and Gensel. Those 2 guys are good enough where they can really alter a team's outlook. There are plenty of players the tier below that, Vetrano, Henrique, Tarasenko. There are a lot of useful players. But guys like Gensel, two-time 40-goal scorer, Buchnevich, multi-time point-per-game player, they don't become available all that often. And we talked about this in the context of selling Lindholm. You might have bought Lindholm at the bottom of his dip. His best performance might have been that season 2 years ago. That's in the past. That you got what you got now. And again, like we always say, Jess and I say a lot on this show, this is out there for a reason. Right. This might be the Penguins trying to incentivize another team that might be currently engaged in conversation with them to pony up a player of Elias Lindholm's caliber to facilitate getting this trade along in a way. Because from what we understand, the Penguins want guys who are good to go. They don't want prospects. They don't want draft picks. They want NHL guys or prospects who are ready to play in the NHL as soon as tomorrow, because they know they've got Sidney Crosby through the 2026 Olympics, and that's it. So they can't wait for guys to develop.
No, and it's always fun when you kind of get to this point, especially like we're not weeks out or even a week out from the deadline. We're like, it's crunch time. And I am really intrigued by how, I guess, buyers are going to approach this, because what are you willing to sell for this? Is this a quick fix? What's going to happen?
Almost. The way I'm thinking about it from the Vancouver perspective, I don't know how open Vancouver thinks their window is. And that's part of what makes this so interesting, being that they haven't been to the postseason in a number of the real playoffs. Yeah. Everybody remembers them making the bubble playoffs and going on a decent run there, but they haven't been to the real playoffs in quite a long time. And you look at their core, they got JT Miller under long-term contract. They've got Lindholm long-term contract. They got Quinn Hughes long-term contract. And then you go into that next tier of guys, Besser, Mikheyev, Höglander, they are in a position where they should be pushing chips in. They feel like they've got the core group of guys together. They've got Pettersson, they've got Hughes, they've got JT Miller, they've got Brock Besser, they got Thatcher Demko, who I haven't mentioned. You've got your core guys. Tinkering around the edges is your goal. Now you think you got the group. And eventually the Flames will get here. We've talked about them needing to get their star player, the guy they're going to build the team around going forward.
Yep.
The Canucks are at the next stage of that. They've got their star players. Now it's about building the supporting cast.
Yeah, and I mean, Vancouver can look right to the Dallas Stars again and see how it's possible. They have their core, and they have, like you said, tinkered around the edges to be legitimate Stanley Cup contenders. And I mean, I would say that that's pretty enticing as a general manager to want to keep doing this and make the actual best decisions, and not just because my friend has a nice cottage and access to a really nice country club in the summer.
We're going to find out a lot about a lot of these guys over the next 3.5, 4 days. And I've said this a lot over the last 2 weeks, and I'll reiterate it again. This is what I find fascinating, because this is where you find out what people actually think of their teams. The Flames may say they think they're in the playoff mix and they're still trying to make it. They traded away 3 of their 6 best players over the course of the last month. That's not a team that thinks they're going for it. Like, even if the ownership actually did nix the Markstrom trade, they know they're not going for it. They're not buying. No. And then you have GMs that are operating on levels of delusion. Like, maybe the Islanders do go out and add to a team that hasn't been in a playoff spot all year. The Penguins, it seems like, have realized it's not going to be their year, and they're taking a step back. I'm very curious to see what the Bruins do, what the Hurricanes do. Yeah. 2 teams that have had pretty good regular seasons, but are clearly missing something from their teams. So we're going to learn a lot over the next few days, and I'm very excited.
Yes, and you're going to want to stick around for all of your NHL trade deadline coverage here at Locked On Flames. And we are going to wrap up the show with, for once the Flames maybe set a good precedent. And we will be right back after this. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. You can follow us on Twitter at Jess Belmosto and at Nick Zararis. Did you think the Flames would kind of set the tone for this at the start of the season?
Yeah, they had all of the assets. We knew they weren't going to be great. Like, at best, our forecast, like the absolute furthest best case scenario, was one of the two wild cards, first round exit. That was the absolute best case scenario coming into the year. And even as stubborn as these general managers are, even they were able to recognize, okay, it's not going to be the year for us. It doesn't make sense to buy these guys age 29, 30 plus seasons on a team that's already paying a lot for guys in their 30s in Huberdeau and Kadri. So let's re-rack, let's get younger, let's get cheaper, and let's set up so that when this new building comes, and I know coming into the season, we didn't know when or if the new building was going to fully come together, but that was ultimately the goal. You know, have a plan that you could sell to the public. So that way, when you open this new building, you're going to be able to do season tickets at a reasonable rate, and you're going to have a public that's engaged. And the Flames always draw well. You know, we talked about that early in the season in the context of if the Flames are bad, are people going to stop showing up? No, the Flames have consistently been a top 10 attendance team in the NHL over the last decade, even in spite of some less than stellar teams. But eventually, you got to sell the public on something. In my opinion, and I know social media is not the best barometer, the opinions I see are that people are okay with this sell-off, which is good. That means you have buy-in and you've bought time for yourself. Now people are inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt because you recognize the problem instead of giving them BS, which has happened from time to time over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really great to have the light at the end of the tunnel being this new shiny building, but also, oh my goodness, you have this really good team to look forward to, and you can get your name on a brick on a wall for just $1,200 if you buy into the Calgary Flames. But like, there's so much to look forward to with this, and right now, it does feel like we're in the trenches a little bit. It might get worse, but it's progress from where we were in October and even July. So I didn't know what we were going to get.
We got breaking news.
Oh.
Anthony Mantha goes to Vegas. That is interesting. I do like that for Vegas. At least they didn't get Buchnevich or Jake Gensel, so that's good for now. That's good for now. But again, the Flames did set the market. They sold off Lindholm. Hell, they sold off Zadorov in December. You know, they really started to set the tone for what everybody else was going to do. And not every GM values talent the same way, but it gives you a starting point. The Flames have done okay at large. They have gotten a lot of assets in return. Don't love all of the assets, but they are making progress. To your point, you know, I feel a lot better about the direction of the team now than I did a year ago, is what I will say.
Yes. It's nice to not have this dark rain cloud that is your coach, just standing over you, and everyone requesting trades. I mean, that's ultimately what they got anyways, but it was on much better terms, I would say. And it's not it just doesn't feel as bad. Like, it really does feel like there is direction, and 6 months from now, we can revisit this conversation, because who knows what the draft and the offseason will hold.
Very well said. There are a lot of pieces that still need to fall. The Flames still have at least one, if not two, moves to make between now and 3:00 on Friday. So we're going to get a real good understanding of what's going on. And by this time next week, we'll have a real good idea of what the priorities are for the summer. I know there are still, 15, 20 games to go in the regular season, but it is not about this year. It is not just about this year. I hope they keep winning. It's fun when they play good games, Yeah. It's not that, like we've been saying, no matter what, you win. Either you win the games and you piss off other teams, or you lose the games and you get better draft position. No matter what, you're not in a bad spot.
Yeah. And that's just kind of, I think, a good mentality to have, because, you could approach this as like, oh my God, this is like the most negative thing like I've experienced. Like it's not, this isn't fun. I don't like hockey anymore. But I mean, yeah, you're not watching like top tier elite hockey, but you do get to watch this gritty team go out there and kind of potentially ruin other teams' seasons. Like it's fun getting to say, oh, like you lost to the Flames. That's embarrassing. At least you have that going for you.
Being a spoiler is very, very fun.
Yeah. And I don't know what the next move is. I mean, we did just get that trade. But I did see something about Noah Hanifin basically being dropped off in Tampa on the Flames trip.
Kyprios is hit or miss. I take his reporting with a grain of salt. He does occasionally get stuff, but he's not very consistent. And, that's not really great reporting. If they can agree to a trade, there's an extension agreed to. Well, if they're letting him get to the point where they're going to let him negotiate what an extension would look like,
we've lost.
But I digress. Nonetheless, there's not a lot to be gained by complaining about hockey media, because hockey media is not going to change. But again, I digress.
My favorite tweet today was Andy Strickland tweeting, hearing Noah Hanifin in Tampa Bay conversations or something like that. And everyone was like, you're like 24 hours late, bud. Everybody had that after 32 Thoughts yesterday.
We all listened to 32 Thoughts yesterday, too. It's great you called somebody who listened to 32 Thoughts yesterday and told you that, but that doesn't help us here, man.
No. And I mean, we're eventually going to get an answer. Ryan Leslie last night during intermission said, he could resign. Okay. Can you elaborate on that? Because is this just going to be a real extension or a sign and trade? But again, there's no way of knowing. We have been playing this guessing game since the summer.
Yeah, we're going to find out a lot. It's very fun. There's a reason everybody loves talking about trades, because everybody feels qualified. So that's what makes this time of year especially fun. Friday, if all the trades happen before Friday will kind of be a letdown. But at the very least, you got stuff to look forward to. You get the fun of checking your phone every 20 minutes at work, wondering if your team finally made a trade and not getting any work done. So at the very least, you're having fun.
Yeah, and that's how you should spend the rest of this season, embracing the fun and the chaos that is not only the Flames, but the NHL as a whole. And we will be back tomorrow to talk more about the Flames and whatever else may happen between the time we end recording and start tomorrow. So make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. your team every day. You can follow us on Twitter at Jess Belmosto and at Nick Zararis. Nick, do you have any final words for our listeners today?
Blue check marks don't mean anything more. Click on the profile before retweeting.